Hey guys, I am jumping on here because I am going to do a watercolor tutorial with you today, and it's just this little print. I'll turn this around, see it. It's just this little joy print. It's super simple, and I'm going to show you how to paint it. Hello. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint this joy watercolor print, and I'm going to be using this Aquash brush pen, and it has water in this chamber, and there's a link to it on my site. I'm just going to be using some palette colors, which are also linked on my website. So I'm just going to start off with some, either you can use watercolor paper or you can use extra thick drawing paper, which isn't as thick as watercolor paper, and it will sometimes be a little bit easier to frame. So in my colors, I'm going to use some of the water from my pen and get it pretty wet. You want your color to be really liquid. And I'm just gonna get that wet, brush some of the excess water off. And I'm gonna start with my letters in the center. So I kinda want them in the center of the page. I'm gonna go thin up for my J, thick down. And then I'm going to get a little more color now. You can see how the color fades now because as it runs out, it gets a little bit lighter, which I like the look of that. So you just wanna come thin up, thick down. And then I'm gonna get a little more color for my Y here. And you want it to be super wet. That actually looks the best when you're using brush pens. And sometimes you might think, oh, it looks too wet, it just looks like a puddle on my page. Well, when that dries, it's gonna look awesome. So I'm just gonna go over this a little bit. It was a little bit light, kind of hard to read it. So just remember, go thin when you go up and thick when you go down. So these thick down strokes, I'm just gonna go over a little bit again. You can even drop a little bit of water on them, which is gonna just make that color really vibrant when it dries. You can see I'm just gonna spread that color. And that's the thing I love about watercolor. You can make things darker just by adding a little bit more pigment and water to them. So I'm just gonna start with a simple word. Now mine's joy because I'm doing this for the holiday season. Obviously you could do any word you wanted, and you could sketch this out too if you had a more complicated phrase or something, but with one word it's pretty easy. So what I'm gonna do is just start my vine over here, and I just want these lines to be pretty similar, but what I love about watercolor and about most things in nature is that they're not perfect. So if your line's bent a little bit or a little bit scattered, it actually looks better, I think, because it's not perfect. Now to start, I'll zoom in here. To start each of my leaves, I'm gonna really let the brush do a lot of the work. I'm gonna use the tip and get it very wet. I'm just gonna make a leaf shape, and I'm gonna use the water to just kind of let it pool and come back down. It's gonna look really wet, if you can see there. But I'm gonna leave it wet like that because when it dries, it's gonna look really nice and have lots of pigment. So I'll leave that zoomed in. So what I'm gonna do is just alternate the sides of these, and I'm gonna alternate sizes. I'm gonna alternate distance. So when things are too symmetrical, they actually don't look natural. So I would just encourage you to try to, make some things bigger and some things smaller, have your lines kind of jaggedy, have maybe like more spacing between some of the stems or some of the leaves than others. And this water looks really thick right now. If you can see, you can almost see it pooling on the page, and that's why you want to use a thicker paper, because if you have just like a water or a printer paper, it's actually just gonna warp your paper. But once you start to draw some of these and the color starts to dry, it will give you those really cool watercolor lines and gradients of color, which is my favorite part of watercolor. So I'm just gonna quickly do this. And you can make these any distance apart. If you feel like, oh, you know what, I actually want that spacing to be smaller, you can just go add one back in. Sometimes it's fun to do just like an extra big one now and then. And I like these leaves to be real thin. Just let the water do the work. If you want to make it darker, just drop some water right on those leaves. There we go. Some of them are facing a little bit more up, and some of them are a little bit more to the side. So whatever you think looks good. Like I said, if it's less symmetrical, it's gonna look more natural. So just leave it just like that. So I'll zoom out a little bit for you. So if you see any spots, like right here, I see a couple that are all pretty small. So I might go in there just with a little bit of water and try to thicken up some of these, just to make it look a little bit more cohesive. So there is one side of it. So I'm gonna stop and we'll hyperlapse the other side.